Hello D1, this is going to be our first lesson for our personal narrative writing book. So what you're going to need is your writing packet, my narrative writing book. You are going to need a pencil and a crayon or some kind of coloring tool. So if you have a highlighter, a marker, I know everybody has crayons, so that's why I'm using a crayon. So any material you have that is a coloring tool, you are going to grab that as well. And let's go ahead and let's get started. So this is going to be our first time using these writing packets. So first things first, we need to write our names. So it says this book belongs to. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to write my name. You shall be writing yours. And after you have written your name, you are going to go ahead, you are going to flip to the first page in your packet. And this is where you're going to need your pencil and your crayon or coloring tool of some kind. And so in lesson 1, our big question is, what is a personal narrative? And so we are going to be talking about what a personal narrative is. And not only are we going to be writing notes about what a personal narrative is, we are going to be looking at keywords that help us determine what a personal narrative is. And so I've already actually written my notes, so I'm going to show you one at a time. Please pause the video if you need extra time. You are in charge of making sure you have all the notes down, so if you need to pause, please go ahead and do so. So our first thing that makes a personal narrative is personal narratives are a retelling of an event or moment from the life of the writer. And so you are copying this down with your pencil. And so, as we've talked about before, personal narratives are just going to be you telling a story about something that has happened in your life. And I'm going to go ahead with my crayon. I'm going to box the word retelling, because a retelling is something that's already happened. We're not going to write a personal narrative about something in the future because it hasn't happened yet. So this is going to be something that has already happened. It's a retelling. And again, pause the video if you need extra time to copy this down. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next point of a personal narrative. So it's best for personal narratives, it is best to write about small moments to keep the narrative focused. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight where it says small moments. It is really important that we write in small moments, because if we start talking about big things, it's really hard for us to stay focused on the story we're talking about. Sometimes we'll get distracted and we start sharing too many details, and I don't understand what the whole point of your story is. So it's best to write in small moments so that way we can really focus on what it is that we are trying to share with the reader. Most often told from a first person point of view. So remember, when we've talked about point of view, first person is when we're going to hear people use I, we, ooh, I broke my crayon, us, me. So we're going to hear them use language like that, and you're going to be using language like that when you write your personal narrative. So most of the time, and in our case, it's going to be written from a first person point of view. That means you're the person telling the story. Then we have that it starts with a strong opening to grab the attention of readers. So that is really, really important. We want to make sure that we start with a really interesting opening. If we start with a boring opening, your reader's not going to want to keep reading. If your story's already boring at the beginning, do you think that they're going to think it's going to get interesting after a while? Probably not. It totally can get interesting, but if you don't start with a really interesting way of getting your reader's attention, they're not going to want to keep reading. So we need to make sure we have a strong opening to grab the attention of readers. And this is a reminder, if you need to pause to make sure you are copying this down with your pencil that you have, you are going to do so. And with a coloring tool of some kind, you are boxing the keywords that I am also boxing. Next, we have that it follows a sequence, beginning, middle, and end. It uses transition words to connect events. And so I want you to highlight where it says sequence. That means our stories are going to have a beginning, they're going to have a middle, and they're going to have an end, which we really saw with our ouch moments, where we had our first, next, then last. We split our middle up into two sections, which is totally acceptable, but we had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and we use transition words. I'm going to go ahead and box transition to connect events. So we're letting our reader know, well, this is what happened first, then this happened, next this happened, and finally this happened. Next, in our personal narratives, dialogue is used to share interactions between the narrator and others. Inner thoughts may also be shared. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight where it says dialogue. And again, if you need extra time, you're making sure you're pausing your video to copy it down. Dialogue, as well as inner thoughts. And as we saw in Miss Walsh's ouch moment, when she did her writing, she shared some inner thoughts that she had when we were talking about when I got kicked in the shin, and I was freaking out thinking in my brain, is it bleeding? And so that was an example of sharing inner thoughts, the things that I was thinking but I wasn't actually saying out loud. And so I used dialogue and quotation marks to show that that's what I was thinking in my brain at the time. And we'll talk much more about dialogue later. Next, we have sensory details. Sensory details and other descriptive language is used to describe characters, setting, and mood. So sensory details, those are going to be using your senses, as you can kind of probably guess from the word sensory. So sensory details, we have our taste, we have touch, we have smell, we have sight. We use that information to help us create really descriptive language that not only describes characters, but also setting and mood, and so it can really help your reader almost imagine themselves being there with you. And then finally, we end with a strong conclusion to reflect and tie it all together. So I'm going to go ahead and box strong conclusion. And the conclusion is so important because it ties it all together. You want to make sure your reader does not have any questions wondering, well, what happened after this? And so you want to make sure you answer all the questions before, and if you have not, then that is what your conclusion is for. And that is going to be it. Remember, your expectation is that this is completed when we come to our Zoom tomorrow morning. And if you have questions about this lesson, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing your completed lesson 1 when we meet for lesson 2 on Zoom. All right, bye, D1.